Yes, you would think that any rational person would respond to that kind of notion in the same way. But look at the way it's happening all over. It's not just happening in Scotland; it's happening all over. It's part of a pattern of behaviour of a certain kind of controlled leader in one Western country after another, who are demonstrably working from the same script. It's no coincidence that all of these Western regimes in these countries are taking similar steps at the same time. They're not acting independently of one another. They're not all having these dreadful ideas independently at the same time. No. This stuff is it's part of the same pattern that we saw during lockdown, where suddenly everyone was saying build back better, everyone was saying narrow window of opportunity, everyone was saying safe and effective. They were clearly centralised scripts.
It was a pandemic of the unvaccinated. I think we can agree on that.
Yes, absolutely. That was a favourite.
So, but what is that? What are we looking at? Who's coming up with these ideas, these talking points? What's the point of it all? Like, I don't want to be a conspiracy nut, but the level of coordination suggests that there is, some sort of body atop all of this controlling everything. I mean, what else does it suggest?
It feels as though, I think it's getting harder and harder to overlook what seems like the certainty that we're on the cusp of change.
Yeah.
A paradigm change. I would say that we're being herded towards feudalism. Most people, for most of 5,000 years of human history, most people pretty much lived in serfdom.
Yeah.
In a feudal state, you can describe it any way you like, but it's a narrow, very, very small group at the top with everything, with all the castles, ownership of everything, and everyone else is so far beneath them as to be at insect level, and treated accordingly. That is what we're going back to.
Really, up until the 19th century,
it was the way of it for everyone everywhere. The kind of way of life that has been possible for some of us, a relative handful in the scheme of things, a blinking of an eye in the great story of human civilization, a tiny, tiny lucky group for a couple of hundred years in the West were able to live lives of unbelievable liberty and opportunity and equality and aspiration, and if you wanted to, you could get whatever you were capable of achieving for yourself.
Yes.
And enough generations have taken that for granted that now it has fallen, and people think that food in the supermarkets, lights on in the dark, police on the street that actually care about the people rather than being enforcers for the establishment. They think that there's been a misconception that somehow is just in the natural order of things, that society works like that. And just the merest glance at the rest of the world at the moment, never mind 5,000 years of history, will show that the possibility of living the kind of lives that some of us have been able to live for a very brief period of time is vanishingly, it's impossibly unlikely what we've had. But too many people have been taking it for granted one after another. That now those who would return us to feudalism saw the opportunity and have been working towards it, and populations all over the West taking it for granted, being tolerant, being nice, keeping their heads down in return for safety and convenience, have laid themselves open. They're not in a fit state to defend themselves against a well-organised, well-motivated small group that wants to return the whole thing to some sort of neo-feudalism. But I mean, that's not to say it's too late. I don't want to be completely negative here. That I do think it's still possible. I think enough people are realising all the time. And I would say,
wait, may I just ask one thing? So are you suggesting, it sounds like you are, and you probably are right, but that some kind of feudalism is the natural state of man? Radically hierarchical societies are just natural.
Yes, absolutely. People enslaved. Slavery is a natural state.
Of course.
It just is. It's been a reality for such a large part of everyone who's ever lived or died.
Well, of course.
through history. But I think, when in 2016, when we had Trump elected here and Britain voted Brexit, subsequent to that, we got COVID and goodness knows what all. Trudy said, perhaps she wasn't alone, but she was the person that I heard say it. She said, those two things were not supposed to happen. They were not in the script. Somebody took their eye off the ball and allowed a figure like Donald Trump to be elected in America.
That's right.
And for the population of Britain, by a narrow margin, but nonetheless by a majority, to leave the European Union. And Trudy said, everything we've had since has been a sustained punishment beating to put those populations back in their box. So everything that's happened, including the evaporation of your southern border, all of that that's happened has been a panicky response by a narrow group that saw two things happening off script that were of great significance because it was democratic. Those were popular votes, and now populism is being stamped on all over the world. The truckers' revolt, farmers' protests all across Europe. All of these things are being mischaracterized by the authorities as far right, as extremist, as all of the same labels. Because
and in both cases,
they've
the
got to
people
nip that.
didn't get what they voted for. I mean, Trump was not able to govern.
No.
Very effectively. He couldn't build the wall that he promised. Was investigated and spied on from the very first day. And I don't think you guys got Brexit. You voted for Brexit, right?
No, absolutely. 52%, I think it was, 52 to 48% in favour of leaving the European Union. And from the moment the ink dried on that decision, all of the powers that be in the establishment, in the civil service, across the political parties, moved heaven and earth to thwart that decision. And so it's been Brexit in name only, Brino, they've called it, because it's now worse. I would say that the situation for those people that aspired to Brexit, they've got less now than they had before the vote happened, because they've been so comprehensively punished and Brexit has been so eviscerated, the very concept of it has been so hollowed out that the people that wanted it have got less than nothing from it. Because it was populist, and notice also that in the last 4 or 5 years, populist has become a pejorative.
How can people use the word democracy to describe your country?
Well, we don't. That's why I have these fundamental problems about. We certainly don't have democracy. I wonder when democracy went away. I wonder for how long it's been standing.
What's your guess?
I really, I mean, in my most conspiratorial moments, I think something began to happen all across the West after the Second World War.
Clearly.
Really, during the war and after the war, I think the moves got. I don't know if it started then, but I think there was a gear shift.
Have you been to Tokyo? Have you been to Japan?
I have filmed in Tokyo.
So then you sort of wonder when you go to Japan, if you go from London to Tokyo, there's no evidence that the side that won actually won and the side that lost actually lost. Like if you didn't know the history, you would think, well, obviously Japan won the war. Look at it. Obviously England lost it. Look at England.
Yes.
What is that?
Oh, yes. I mean, there are all sorts of things that are confusing. I'm not a historian. I love history. I'm fascinated by history. My shelves are full of history books. But
how many books have you written?
Written? 12 or 13?
I think it's fair to call you a historian.
But I'm not an academic. I don't have any, and nor do I want to be. I never really have had that. It's not in my nature. I'm not really. Anyway, so it means that I'm prepared. I'm perfectly happy to be at home to unorthodox ideas about history because I don't have any academic. I don't have a professorship to defend.
Maybe that's why you can see the world clearly.
And I sometimes wonder if I have a USP, a unique selling point. I think it may be that the things that I have said over the last few years, everyone knows they're true.
Yeah.
It's just that for whatever reason, I've said them. and I've had the opportunity and the platform from which to say them, and because I am just a regular person saying what every other regular person knows is true, that's my. That's my. But we've wandered off.
I think that's a great. You're qualified enough. You're not an Oxford Don. But you've been right about a lot of things.
So I've got basic questions about the Second World War.
Okay, what are they? Like, clearly something important changed in the West in 1945. What was that?
What's very interesting to me is that Hitler and Stalin were together at the beginning.
Yeah, of course.
Of it, and when Poland was invaded, Britain said, we will do whatever it takes to restore freedom and democracy to the people from whom it's been denied, stolen.
And then what happened, Neil Oliver?
And then you've only got to read any coverage of the Second World War to know that at the end of the Second World War, Poland was left swallowed whole by.
Well, they handed it to Stalin.
So the stated objective.
What is that?
The stated objective of Britain declaring war at the time was, well, you didn't do it. You didn't do that.
Well, you didn't even try. And in our country, it's illegal to criticize Winston Churchill. He's the greatest hero in world history.
And when you look at the murkiness that happened at Yalta, between Roosevelt and Stalin and Churchill, and the fact that agreements were arrived at somehow where many people who wanted whatever you would call the West, they wanted to be the West, they were just allowed to be swallowed whole by the communist bloc.
Yeah, to the most violent totalitarian in history. And so they handed these countries, they went to war to protect the sovereignty of these countries that they then handed.
And people were being chased back across specified lines back into that.
So what is that? Clearly, there's lying here. So what's the truth?
So we started there because we were speculating about when it all started to go wrong. When the slide towards anything that ends in ism is the same. Whether it's fascism or communism or any of these things end up with piles of corpses. You can't get a cigarette paper between any of these ideologies. So it's important not to be distracted by whether or not it's National Socialism or communism or whatever. They're all the same. They're good for a handful of people and they're catastrophic for everybody else. And so clearly something shifted up a gear in the West, in the middle of during the Second World War and after, and has been moving faster and faster ever since. But I think there's been an extraordinary gamble taken now, because even people who are in a state of semi-slumber like myself were aware of notions like a social contract. That we as citizens would be no taxation without representation. We would have our views represented. We would have our liberty defended. We would be safe in peaceful countries, and in return for that, we would pay tax and we would submit to certain otherwise onerous restrictions on you can't do anything. You've got to agree to be policed by consent and so on and so on. And that's okay. So there's now a social contract. There's a quid pro quo there for people. There's a reason for people to comply because there's something in it for them. Liberty, aspiration, hope, all of that being protected by legislation and a constitution and all of that. The gamble that's been taken now is that all of that is being taken away. Everything that the people, all of the inducements to be law-abiding, peaceful citizens, is being taken away. And what do I get in return? Nothing. You're going to get a digital ID. You're going to get central bank digital currencies. You're going to live in 15-minute cities. You're going to have we'll tell you what to eat. Your currency will be programmable, so we'll have complete moment-to-moment in real-time control of everything you do, everything you want to do. Now, that's a heck of a gamble